Privet Katila Wanding Ruski Desu. And today I have a very, very special guest. Someone that you guys might not know because he's very, very new on the YouTube sphere, but he's already but don't be fooled. Just because he doesn't have a lot of subscribers does not mean that his videos aren't absolutely perfect. Don't mind me flattering, but he's done excellent work already in his first few videos discussing the importance of family, marriage, communities, and nations. And I think he's a very well-articulate guy, and I was blown away, and I had to have him on his stream to expose him to more people who to check him out. So, and we might also have another guy come in, depending on he was supposed to come in, but there were some scheduling conflicts. But hopefully, we might also get Red Eagle Patriot on. But for right now, we have Forum for Conservatism. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for that introduction. It's very, very kind of you. This is actually the first collaboration I've ever done. So years down the line, when I'm a powerful figure with millions of subscribers, you can say it started here.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll be. You could appoint me as some sort of advisor or something once you become king or something.
I'll keep that in mind.
So before we start, for pretty much no one knows who am I exactly talking to? So I wanted to ask, what exactly are you politically? And what's your basically political philosophy? What's your main the purpose of your channel? And you might be a lot of things. You might have an economic view, a social view, or there's many types of flavors, but what's your main bread and butter kind of philosophy that you would describe yourself as? And
all right, that's a great question. I identify as a national conservative. Politically, I align very closely with the likes of Tucker Carlson, the European politicians Matteo Salvini, and also Viktor Orban. And in the American political context, I guess you could say Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. I could also be described as a national populist, and I'm also very socially conservative, and I think that is important to include my political identity, so national conservative it is. Economically, I'm a distributist, I believe you are as well, and I favor policies that as a whole serve the interest of the American worker, the American family, and the American nation.
Oh, that's just music to my ears, my dude. That's just we need you in power now. But
I wish I was in power.
So may I ask, so how did you exactly come about? We kind of discussed it a little bit before the stream, but how did you become a national conservative? What was your political journey that led you to this point?
Sure. Ever since I was a kid, I was interested in politics. I remember when I would have been 7 during the 2008 election. I didn't know anything about the figures. I just knew that both my parents were Republicans, and so I was inclined to support McCain blindly because of that. And ever since then, my interest in politics has kind of festered a lot, and I paid a little more attention to the 2012 elections, but I still didn't really know quite what I was talking about, except that I wanted Tim Pawlenty, who was the governor of Minnesota at one point, to win the Republican nomination. Eventually, I think he was the first to drop out, actually, so that didn't really go too well. And after that, Mitt Romney obviously lost that. And I remember watching the election coverage of the 2014 midterms with the Republicans winning the Senate. And then I paid specific attention to the 2016 elections. During the primaries, I was a complete libertarian. I supported Rand Paul at first, and then I kind of was half and half between Rubio and Cruz. And I was vehemently against Trump. I think that part of the reason, or even most of the reason for that, is because I was kind of scared, I guess, to say what I actually believed in. So, when he proposed things like a complete shutdown on Muslims entering the United States, I was inclined to oppose that, not necessarily out of a conviction opposing that, but rather a desire to fit into the mainstream of political thought. And so ever since President Trump won the presidency, I've been kind of gradually transitioning to being more of a nationalist and a populist. But I never really understood exactly what those meant until, say, January of last year. around that time, I began a gradual political awakening and really began to move away from libertarianism and see it as the sort of flawed, cowardly ideology that it really is. Um, Ever since then, nationalist has been how I describe myself. I'm also a conservative. Obviously, we already covered that though. So my political journey is, I think, indicative of what a lot of people have gone through in their lives, and hopefully, what a lot more people will go through.
Oh yeah, I hope 100. I hope to because we're going to mention this later, or it's going to be a big part of the stream is to discuss the right wing's views on community and kind of more of the social aspect, which has been at least in America. I think in Europe, the right wing, at least the more stronger right wing parties, there are more community and nation focused, while as the American right wing are very like individualistic and atomized, and they don't care about kind of as the only things they look through is what's best for the individual, and it's just individual libertarian type of stuff.
Right. Yeah. There's in American politics, there's this marriage of conservatism and libertarianism that is just completely detrimental to the idea of what right wing actually means.
Oh yeah,
It
100%.
doesn't mean small government. It doesn't mean low taxes. It means family. It means order. It means a nation. It means community.
Oh yeah, 100%. They've kind of there has to be some sort of there's been like a lot of like civil war kind of going on about what exactly doesn't what are some right wing politics, and it's
Oh yeah, definitely.
they're trying to like and remember the purpose of us is trying to push the Overton window to try to make our ideas palatable. When I made a 1 hour long like immigration video about America like about a few
Mhm.
days ago. It took me a little while, but like in it, I like described like I had this whole like 20 policy, you could say we're kind of like policy wonks, but
Uh-huh.
I won't say that far, but just kind of policy minded. But like the first thing I talked about was a 10-year immigration moratorium,
Hmm.
and
I think it
like
should actually be longer than that, but yeah, that's a good start. Yeah.
and then I like 2 days later, Trump's like, we're gonna be looking into like closing, like stopping all immigration. That was a huge win. Not just
Hmm.
now, obviously, from maybe we'll have to see it until action comes through, and maybe there probably will be a lot of exceptions. But the fact that we even have this discussion going on is indicative of we're pushing, the so-called, the what it means to be right wing isn't, because the way they do is like it's kind of like how the um, well, it's like they're trying to use like, oh well, we're against abortion, which is good, but then they're
Hmm.
like, but then they try to the main thing they do when they're in power is like tax cuts. Like for example, when
Yeah.
Trump was elected for the first 2 years, I mean, he had all three branches of government under his control, and or all the Senate, the well, not three branches, the House of Representatives, Senate, and the executive. He could have passed,
Well,
basically.
he did have all three because he had the judicial as well.
Yeah, that's true. But the power for he could have, and the biggest thing he got out of that was a tax cut, and
Hmm.
that's I mean, that was nothing. This is not going to win. In fact, the Democrats won in 2018 because like they bludgeoned him with health care, and
Oh
so it
yeah.
was so it
Yeah.
it
And can I say something about
oh
that?
yeah, yeah, sure.
In regards to the tax cut, what he could have done is, I believe the Senate gets 2 votes on budget reconciliation acts a year, and they spent that on that terrible health care bill, and they spent it on the tax cuts when they could at least fit one of them on the wall, and
Mhm.
we would actually have a wall right now rather than 2.7 miles of new border wall and a bunch of like uh, replacement fence. So yeah.
Yeah, it's just a matter of like what exactly the people who are like a right wing party in America should look like and what they prioritize.
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm not even like a lot of people are like, well, yes, I agree with you. We need immigration restriction. We need like pro family, but I'm also like, like they're also they kind of are holdovers from a lot of their libertarian days.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, I actually would be fine with like raising taxes on more richer folks.
Oh
I
yeah.
yeah, I'd be totally fine with that. And it's not like tax. Like I'm actually against tax cuts. At least for it's not even something I would even go for. So a lot of these things aren't even like, not even priorities. It's more like they're doing the opposite of what they should supposed to be doing. And a
Hmm.
lot of they're all, you saw this bill in I think the House or Senate. They're trying to like streamline like green cards. We're like, oh, there's so much backlog. We need to like make them all like have permanent residency now. They're trying to make it for like the Indian workers and all that.
Hmm.
I don't know what exactly the bill's called, but seen it. I forgot, it was a few months ago. But they're sabotaging it, and so basically we're trying to reframe this whole idea of what it means to be right wing in America and actually have our priorities straight.
Yeah, it's a momentous task, but again, when people see the two visions, small government and low taxes is not really an alternative vision to what the Democrats have. It's what would be an alternative vision would be border controls, national identity, pro-natalist policies, which I suppose we'll get to in a bit, and order. And you can side with all four of those things, which I would think would be relatively popular among the American population. And if we ran on that rather than the typical libertarian agenda, I think would be much more successful in national and state elections, as well as local.
Yeah, and in terms of like the as you mentioned, so as we're gonna go down, what I kind of put a few of before we start on like kind of your bread, the main thing you're talking about, pro-natal, we're going to do that, but we have to first of all kind of we were just touching upon it, like blemishing it a little bit, but we have to. For me, there's two big things that I think in the Western world are kneecapping us into making that I think are undermining our nations, and I call it radical individualism and radical equality. And
Yeah, I agree.
it's kind of almost like a religion in a way that it's like if you mention like it's freedom and equality, that's like the two. If you had to if you had to ask people what defines like your country, they'd probably say, well, liberty and equality or something like that. But I think it's for the right wing specifically. For the left wing, that's mostly about their focus on trying to make everything equal. So that's more of a left wing thing. For the radical individualism, that's mostly a very big right wing. That's we're going to focus on in this discussion because I think that's what's permeating throughout our society. Because, for example, the way I see it, what the social contract theory is, right?
Yeah.
So in the abstract, I agree with it. Now, from what I learned about it, a lot of people say the way a lot of right-wing people think is that, well, all society and community is just, well, I'm only in it for myself. Like, what is it selfishly for me?
Yeah, that's that's sort of the theory behind the libertarian talking point of live and let live, which is essentially I don't care about anything else except my own bottom line.
Oh yeah, and it's and community only matters as so far as it directly helps you. So a lot of libertarians sometimes they're like, well, I actually don't care what happens to the community. Sometimes they try to mask it by saying like, well, I do care, but like if everyone just cared for themselves, then that would necessarily imply everyone would care for everyone else. They're trying to.
Yeah, that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah. And one way I think that kind of describes it is from this French philosopher named Rousseau. So his idea was that, well, man is born free, but society puts him in chains, and I think that's what permeates a lot of right wing thought is that all these systems of oppression are made by like when there's like when the mother has like all these systems like like your family unit, your nation, your all these things that you're born in, like the civil society, those are like they put expectations upon you and you're not exactly it's not completely about you, and that kind of restricts your ultimate freedom, which is basically means as long as you can do doing whatever you want as much as you want is like the ultimate goal. Like freedom is like the end point, and anything that interferes with that is somehow some sort of evil thing. So I think it's that radical individualism that it's just all about you, and there is no. And so when we're going to discuss later about the importance of family and community, that you have to fundamentally break that assumption, because if you keep that assumption, then why do you care if the families are breaking apart?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because if because then it doesn't matter, because it's like, well, those are other people's problems, not mine.
Uh-huh. Yeah, community definitely. It's worth a hell of a lot more than people give it credit for, at least like libertarians and even people on the left. Community makes us who we are. Without community, we we don't really have a place to fit in, and that's so important for humans as social creatures.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, I 100% agree.
Mhm.
It's I in my opinion, if I had to give my opinion, I mean, this is you can't separate, like, you're not like a one man island. I always say that.
Oh yeah.
The one thing I think that's the one of the biggest problems in the Western world is this, like, this we've deconstructed our identity so much that we've become like this rootless nihilist. We've kind of we did some sort of like civilizational suicide, where we deconstructed our entire civilization, and now we're in this rootless nihilistic world. And I think that's what a lot of people are trying to, like, they're like, well, in this modern world we might have a lot, all this, open, all this globalized world, we have more materialistic stuff, and maybe we could travel more, but it's like, fundamentally, what have we lost at achieving that? And we're materially we might be better off, but
Yeah, on the surface we can buy 4K TVs for $500, but behind the scenes we have the families breaking down, no community, small towns all across the Midwest dying thanks to globalization and free trade. So it appears, if you look at it at a surface level, as if we're doing great, but when you peel back that surface, it's quite clear that modern society isn't all that it is cracked up to be.
Oh yeah, it's also so there's a lot of like, it's the immaterial stuff, that things that you can't necessarily like, like belonging and purpose
Absolutely.
and identity, things that aren't like, you could mathematically sort of, map it as easily as you could, like, oh, wealth or something.
Hmm.
And so in terms of that, I think that's the biggest thing we have to fundament before we start even talking about why all these things are important, why family is important, why community is important, why, about the nation, because fundamentally it's one of the big pillars that are fundamentally cutting at, this civilizational nihilism we have in the Western world, is the idea that anything that has to it's all about the individual.
Hmm.
And now it's not like, there's nothing, I'm not like disregarding individualism entirely. There's obviously, people have their own different unique tastes and, like, ways
You have
of
to
doing
strike a
things.
balance, yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's you can't separate yourself from the community, no matter how much you try.
No.
And when you try to do that, you just leave a completely atomized world. Which is something that, at least, besides, one of the biggest things I fight is identity. For the peoples of the world to have their own states, but
Yeah.
a big thing that's under that is, like, the idea of, like, a national identity, a sense of purpose to your
Hmm.
life. And it's to dispel with this atomized nihilism that's permeating throughout the Western world. The idea of, like, so, like, for example, if I had to compare and contrast, so, for example, as I mentioned before with Rousseau, that man is born free but put in chains. So his idea, if you look at it, is that, well, when, and you mentioned it in your marriage video, that a lot of these Marxist types, they're like, women are, if you make women get a choice, they're going to still be subservient to, like, their husband, because that's like, they'll you have to break apart the nuclear family,
Yeah.
because you can't, because that's a oppression construct.
Yeah, the notion of the wife being the proletariat and the husband as the bourgeoisie, which was proposed by Engels, which I think is kind of ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So
And the thing, what we have to, so, like, when for me, so when a libertarian or a Marxist, the people who fundamentally think about oppression and things, that anything that oppresses the individual is some sort of, like, is sort of like duties, like, you know, when the society has like duties it placed upon them. So when mothers have a duty to like nurture their children, and then fathers have a duty to care for their family. So like, you know,
Mhm.
when there's like, you know, you might be like, well, so to them, when a father has a family and has to actually go out and support them, that's an oppressed, yeah, the father's oppressed, or the mother having to stay at home and not, you know, being able to do whatever she wants and like sleep with whoever she wants and do whatever she, you know, she actually has like, you know, she actually has to be a loving mother and like take care of children. That's oppression to both of them.
Well, I
And
don't. Well, I think. Are you talking about just like
oh, that
um
I'm viewing like what the these
the
libertarian
Marx?
Marxists
Yeah.
would look
Okay.
at it.
I don't think it's so much the father being oppressed. I think it's mainly some sort of gender egalitarianism manifesting in a desire to destroy the family. I think that they view the father as being the one who is the oppressor here. Which,
Hmm.
I mean, going out and winning bread for your family is not easy. It's
Hmm.
probably it's probably the most difficult, actually.
Hmm.
So it's just kind of a flawed ideology, Marxism.
Hmm. And I was yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. It's the
Yeah, I know.
gender
Uh-huh.
equality. I was just trying to point out how you know, when the father has that duty, right? That's something
Hmm.
that's you know, I mean, well, why can't he just leave whenever he wants to? Why does he have obligations? You know, that's it's like because to that man's, you know, individuality, right? You
Hmm.
know, he's, you know, according to a libertarian mindset, the mindset, or you know, that he's being, you know, obviously they focus on the mother because she has to stay at home and take care of
Hmm.
kids. But you know, it's I'm just kind of viewing it, also putting it on like how they would view like a father too.
Yeah. Hmm.
So it's but to me, you know, I think, you know, what we, you know, you know, so that family is like putting the mother and father in chains, that because, you know, that's, you know, they're obligated to stay together. They can't just sleep with whoever they want. They can't just, you know, run off because they have obligations now and duties.
Hmm.
But I think what this blinds is that when you have duties and obligations, this is actually, you know, when you have a family. Now, obviously, I can't speak from experience because I'm young. I'm, as you mentioned, you're young
Yeah.
too. So
Hmm.
I mean, we don't have family. So, but if you talk to anyone who does have families, and you know, a lot of some of my teachers have talked about when they first had their first child in the hospital and how it felt like holding a child, like their own child in their arms. And you talk to any family, like this is the most beautiful thing in your entire life,
Oh, definitely.
the most fulfilling thing you could ever do. You know, far more fulfilling than, you know, making PowerPoints for a corporate, you know,
Yeah,
job.
exactly. What a terrible fate that women are getting to stay at home with their children rather than working themselves to death for a soulless corporation. That's terrible.
Yeah, and it's very so basically for me, and not only that, and here's the ironic part. So not only does like obligations and like duties to those outside of you make a stronger society, because that's, you know, fundamentally society is how
Hmm.
we relate to each other. Not only when you think that, well, you know, it like, for example, when you want to care, like let's say an old person's having trouble like walking across the street,
Hmm.
like it's not like, well, hold up, like if I help him out, you know, maybe he'll do something for me. Maybe he's rich. Maybe if I, or maybe you're like, maybe you're more like high mind. You're like, well, maybe when I'm old, I want someone to take care of me. It's like that's not how you think. You think like, this is the right thing to do to help an old man cross the street. It's just that's what you do.
Yeah, and the
Um,
libertarian response to a situation like that would essentially just be ignoring it and just letting him fall down or get hit by a car or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and but not. Here's the ironic part: is that um, when not only does it make strong societies, but you know, when there isn't that sort of bond in those sorts of community bonds and familial bonds, you know, that rootless and atomized person is enslaved and doomed to nihilism. So in fact, it destroys their you know,
Hmm.
if you want to think about it just through an individual lens, but also when a man or a woman has, you know, a strong civil society, they have a family, they have a religion, they have a community, they have a healthy work that they do every day, they have, and a nation that they take pride in. When that person is rooted and has purpose, I think fundamentally that is more liberating and enriching than just you being a complete rootless, you know, consumer.
Oh, definitely. The more obligations and duties you have, the less free time you might have, but the more meaning your life will have. If you just sit around all day in like your apartment playing video games, it might be fun in the short term, but how happy are you really once that layer goes away, once you turn off the video games and you have to try and fall asleep at night knowing that your life is you feel a sense of unaccomplishment. So I think obligations are a lot more important than people understand. Yeah.
And I think also one thing that what doesn't make sense in a libertarian point of view, this whole radical individualism notion, is that um, like how do they take into account people like laying down their lives for, like, let's say someone like someone like mug like let's say someone's about to attack your family and then you attack them and they take out and like maybe they have a gun, but you, like, if they're about to shoot, like, say your wife, and you charge them, and then maybe you die, like, how do they account for that? Like, how, like, that doesn't help you individually, you're dead. And but, or how about someone laying their life down for their nation? Like,
Yeah.
how does that account for all the people who've, like, back in the day, or even in modern day, they do out for for a purpose of their nation, or just ideology or something they're something grander than themselves, and then they just lay down their lives, because that doesn't take into account their this isn't like, because fundamentally you're losing, you might lose your life, and then you're gone forever. And so that's how does this worldview take into account that? That's one thing I always think about.
I definitely agree with that. And just a funny thought popped into my head of like a libertarian whose wife's purse gets stolen, and then he's just like, fuck that bitch, you can have it. So that's kind of the libertarian worldview right there, just in a nutshell. At least extreme libertarianism. Obviously, not all libertarians are like that. They're just, a lot of them have been brainwashed to believe the sort of hyper individualism that will ultimately consume them.
It's more, I don't think it's not like trying to make fun of. I think libertarians, this is why a lot of them try to make, like, well, I'm obviously they say they're like, I'm using some of my morals or something like that, but I'm just it's more of the ideology, like what its logical progression would entail. And so now that we've kind of discussed why, just kind of why it doesn't make sense that you're just some sort of one-man island, or you're and whatnot, I think we should start to the bread and butter of this live stream, which is basically, what is the importance of the family unit, and what are like, why should society take into account why families are, why should the government or the state encourage monogamous families? And then we'll also from there move to pronatalism. I'll let you take it away.
All right, brilliant. So I think it's pretty indisputable that strong families build strong societies. You can see the effects of single motherhood among particularly the Black community, but it's also coming to others as well. When in my video, I talk about the efforts of the early Bolsheviks to dismantle the family as part of the communist ideals of the pursuit of egalitarianism. With their effort to remove women from the home, they instituted no-fault divorce laws. If anyone in your audience didn't know that, it was a Bolshevik invention originally. And they had that it was so easy to get divorces, they would essentially call them postcard divorces, because all one had to do to get a divorce would be to go to their local Bureau of Statistics and file for a divorce, and then their spouse would be informed of that request within 3 days. So, and as a result of that, you get a lot of extreme societal breakdown. Like, there was a particular thing that was happening called summer brides, where Russian farmers would marry strong women during the summers, during the harvest season, and then they would divorce them once winter came. So it was a source of free labor, essentially. So in their effort to liberate the women, they essentially commit them to slave labor. So that's kind of ironic.
It's kind of like in the modern day how we liberated women from staying at home and having like a healthy family life, and now they can be liberated making PowerPoints for like an international corporation.
Yeah, it is kind of funny to see people who are who are claim to be so anti-corporation, just thinking women's ultimate destiny is to like work themselves to death for those corporations that they claim to hate.
And I think also one thing that leads to this, as you mentioned it earlier, is gender equality, and feminism's
Mhm.
kind of like the guiding thing that made towards gender equality.
Definitely.
Now, obviously, one thing I mentioned is that we have to understand that men and women are not similar at all. They're
No.
radically, they're radically different. Again, this goes more to the radical equality side of the thing, as I mentioned earlier, about
Mhm.
one of the big things that kind of undercut our civilization. The idea that everything has to be equal, and if it's not equal, then there has to be some sort of, societal reasons for that. I think one fatal flaw of America, at least in that a lot of left wing types I hear say, it's like, well, I want America to live up to its founding ideals of everyone being equal. But the thing is that this is an impossibility. You can't you can't legislate equality,
Mhm.
and you can't legislate men and women being dissimilar in every single field in every single way. Maybe you could get them equal opportunity,
Uh-huh.
but you can't legislate women. There's let's just say there's a reason why you don't see a lot of like female infantry captains or some
Right.
officers. There's in fact, not only that, they in the military they have like there's like physical fitness tests, and they like take into account that they actually have lower physical fitness standards for women than they do men. And it's this biology informs our culture too. So for example, if one of us slaps a woman, obviously we're men, and it's kind of understood that if a man slaps a woman, a man's much more stronger, much more powerful, and could most of the time take out a woman just based on strength alone, because obviously men are stronger than
Mhm.
women. So if you slap a woman, that's bad, and obviously it should be bad. But
Mhm.
if a woman slaps a man, now everyone might say you can't slap anyone, but obviously just in people's minds it's less
Yeah, it's
severe.
less severe, yeah.
So that's
I guess it sort of gets down to the root flaws of egalitarianism. That being that we're not really equal. That doesn't mean that we can't treat each other fairly, but we aren't equivalent. We aren't the same. There are differences between us.
Mhm.
And trying to pretend that those differences don't exist is more harmful than acknowledging them by
Oh yeah.
probably tenfold.
100%, man, you're like hitting everything. I it's the thing is that I think people would understand that, like, I think where it gets tricky is that I think you could convince people that there's differences between people. Like, obviously me and you might have strengths and weaknesses, but
Hmm.
then it gets different. Like when you say groups of people start, you could actually kind of determine, this is just statistics, but you could determine like how groups act in certain, uh, if you take one group, they will act a certain, they will eventually filter onto certain ways just based on their biology or the way they grew up or something.
Hmm.
And you could, I mean, the big thing they say is like, well, one person didn't fall into that, but it's like, it's you could determine with like a relatively good, rule of thumb, like this is where people generally fall into. Men will generally go into more hard, if like, people who are like having to like in like construction where it's like backbreaking labor, you're going to
Hmm.
see mostly men there. Like it's not a, there's a reason why most teachers, daycare workers, and nurses, these like, kind of have the same with jobs that have sort of the same undertones of like nurturing, motherly type of thing, are
Hmm.
mostly made with women.
Yeah.
And so it's not a surprise.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it isn't. It's a testament to our differences, and I sort of talk about this. Masculinity and femininity are just two halves of a whole. It's like yin and yang.
Mm-hmm.
They're perfectly contrasting, and that's why marriage works the way it does, because it's not just two people who love and care for each other. It's those dual natures contrasting and forming a proper whole.
Yeah, I mean, I actually put that in exactly as you put it in my family video. The way I said is that um the way when children need families, it's like, so obviously a boy needs a father and a girl needs a mother, but like they need so a boy needs mostly masculine influence, a girl needs mostly feminine influence, but it's like they both need to come together so you could get because there's there's a certain way that like feminine traits that men need to like take care, like be chivalrous, or
Hmm.
not just purely like like I'm gonna take control in every single situation, but maybe like manners and things more of
Hmm.
a kind of maternalistic view, but a little it's like how there's like yin and yang, and there's like a little part of in
Yeah.
each.
Hmm.
So obviously the boy is mostly framed from masculine from the father, but he needs also the mother. And just as in this, but in this society, what happens is that is mostly the boy having an almost entirely female influence, and very very few male influences which he needs.
Yeah, and in addition to that, the boys need to learn compassion from their mother in the ideal society, and girls need to learn a sense of, I guess, self-respect from their fathers. This is where the stereotype of, say, very promiscuous women with daddy issues comes from, because they didn't have a father figure in their lives, and thus they have no respect for themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
so their choice of mate will pretty much always reflect that lack of self-respect.
Yeah, generally it's going to be pretty much of a. I mean, the results speak for themselves. I mean,
Mhm.
the type of
They
girls
do.
who, yeah, we don't have to go into that, but
Yeah.
so obviously, marriage is like so. What I mean, so marriage basically, this whole idea of like all these policies that we could probably go into as well about helping marriage and protecting marriage and heralding marriage, is basically the idea that a union between two monogamous man and a woman for the purposes of creating children. This is the fundamental bedrock of society. When we're going to also talk about pronatalism because it's basically intertwined with this, but we have to ask ourselves, what is the fundamental purpose of our civilization? Like, why are we all here? Like, why are we doing all? Why are we building? Why are we toiling? Why, like, the nations that have a high time preference when they could think in terms of 100 years or 200 years. How, there's a good proverb. It's like, I forgot. I need it. It's basically, I don't think this is exactly, but it's,
Hmm.
societies grow great when old men plant trees, knowing they'll never like sleep under them. It's going to be for their children.
Hmm.
And, it's something like a, if I could, I'm going to quickly look it up, but, uh,
I think I know what you're talking about. I think it's when men plant seeds that they're uh, I can't remember. Yeah, you have to look it up.
a society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in.
That's the one.
And it's just why why are you why would you take because right now a big problem in our society is everyone thinks in the short term. The thinks of like, well, I'm just gonna because it feels good like right now. I'm gonna smoke weed because it's good right now. I'm gonna have sex with a stranger because it's good right now.
Mhm.
And it's not like I'm gonna like actually do the backbreaking labor of like a 20-year commitment and like having children and like passing my lineage. And actually it's kind of like the way I see it is that which breaks the fundamental bond of that breaks the fundamental idea of this atomization, is that you're not an atomized individual. There's a link from your ancestors that stretches back all the way back,
Mhm.
and this nation, we weren't just born in this nation that oh, we got lucky. This isn't luck. This was a systematic effort from our ancestors that built this nation up, and
Mhm.
they passed the baton to us, and now it's our duty to protect it, preserve it, and pass it on to the next generation.
Yeah,
For
we have a responsibility to preserve our civilization, and more importantly, to give back something to the civilization that has allowed us such comfort. And it's not nothing to contribute children. That's everything.
oh yeah,
And kind of along these lines, I remember this. I think I saw this debate with the streamer Destiny, where he said that he would be something along the lines that he would be more comfortable with society dying out than us taking action to and making people start families, which I think is kind of quite telling of the left's vision for the future.
I mean,
So,
they're the ones that also infected with this, like, libertine, like, philosophy of just like, well, it's better for all society to just die than actually start, forcing people to do stuff.
yeah.
And because then that actually implies you have people actually have obligations and everything, as we
Hmm.
mentioned. The whole purpose of civilization. There's a good quote. It's like, why aren't there a lot of women in history? Like, a lot of it is about men and what men are doing, because women were too busy making the future. They were too busy at being, creating children, and they were the ones what the men were doing were passing their civilization on to. That the whole purpose of why we're doing all this is for our posterity.
Hmm.
That's like the whole. I mean, even if you want to take it through a materialistic scientific lens, we are kind of programmed to, create children, and we know that the best way, and that's the whole purpose of society. If the next generation is just as is only as good as the generation that raised them is. And if you raise children in a broken system like we are now, with broken families and a broken society, you will get broken in people. A lot of
Hmm.
people are like, well, they're just radical, they're all individuals that, their family doesn't affect them or whatever. But what we understand is that it does. And as we mentioned before, because you're not a rootless animal, you're a human being with influences from your family, from your community. And when you have a strong foundational base, that is where growth comes from, where you could actually achieve your full potential and become a better person, not just as yourself, where you have respect for yourself, where you have a meaning and purpose and a root to you, but also when you that also extends to the greater society as well. So in an ironic way, it's not like, well, it helps society but it sacrifices you. But sometimes that might make, sometimes if your society is about to be destroyed, sometimes some people will lay down their lives to make sure that doesn't happen. But
Oh yeah, it's sort of it's out of a sense of civic duty, classical republicanism, sort of like what's his name, Cincinnatus from the Roman Empire. That's kind of what that tale is about. It's you have a responsibility to the society in which you live. Your
mm-hmm,
society isn't merely to yourself.
mm-hmm,
So yeah, there's a greater purpose in life, and you have to achieve that.
mm-hmm. And it's all about this. I mean, this is all what civilization, as I mentioned before, it's the bedrock of any sort of, because this is where we all, after we grow out of our family, once we start spreading out and kind of going with our own families, or going out to doing our own things outside of the family, like that we grew up in, from our formidable, when we're growing up, most of it's coming from our family. And so when we have strong families, this is where we create the best individuals.
Hmm.
And not just best individual, okay, not even like in a materialistic sense, because like, oh well, we just, because it's not just materialistic that, okay, we have good families, then that just means better results, which is true. But it's also the immaterial, the idea of like, there's nothing, Katie, I can't, there's a lot of things in this world that you just can't calculate, that you can't exactly, maybe, it's like, coming, let's say you're out working and then you come back home to your childhood home, and you see your grandmother and you hug her, and you like see your mom and your dad, and there's a certain like feeling to that is just irreplaceable than you just being some person without roots.
Hmm. Definitely, I agree with that, and I think that there's some brilliant wisdom that can be found in some of the things you just said. So thank you for that.
Thanks. So in terms of now, and we're gonna go a little bit to pronatalism. So explain, like, why should, I kind of touched upon a lot of it. Maybe I stole your thunder a little bit, but maybe if you may explain why, like, okay, so maybe having a compatible partner is good, not just for the society but for yourself, to find security and stability, and like a loving connection that makes you whole. Maybe marriage is good. So as you mentioned, as you talked about before, why should people have children?
Well, I think because I think I kind of touched upon this earlier. We all owe something back to our civilization,
Mm-hmm.
and children are just as valuable as a contribution as someone who would say build a building that would last 1,000 years, because you're building a lineage that will hopefully last 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And children are essentially the future of our nation. Well, not essentially, they are basically. And there are those who will carry on our civilization as we're gone. As so, it seems kind of absurd to me that we view motherhood as simply a sort of extracurricular activity. As soon as that thought first occurred to me, I couldn't really put it back in my head. We pay childcare workers, yet we don't pay mothers. I think it really betrays the misguided priorities that come with a liberal democracy.
Man, you actually said something that's really good. You're like, why, we pay childcare workers, but we don't pay. That's a very, I think I'm gonna have to steal that. But that's a good point. I mean, it's like, okay, maybe even in the most advanced societies that maybe, okay, you could stay with your child for the first 3 months. Okay, now you have to go back to being a corporate wage slave. The
ideal society by people who espouse a paid maternal leave is essentially just 3 months with your kid, and then you gotta be separated from it for the next 18 years for 40 hours a week.
Yeah, and so in your opinion, what do you think is what are some factors on why there's been less birth rates? And a lot of people say that, well, it's because of our technological society and women getting educated, and because of birth control, and because of that, it's because we have less. Now, obviously, I agree that's a part of it, but I don't think it's like a necessary consequence where we become like, we can't maintain at least like a 2.2 birth rate or something like that. We could actually, we could increase our birth rate, but there's a lot of so in your opinion, like, why is it that our birth rate is so low, and which ways do you think we could help improve it?
It is a really good question. And in a lot of my personal life, I'm surrounded by a lot of conservative people, conservative women, and they all have children. So I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to perceive this data on a personal basis, because what I see on the ground doesn't back up what's on the paper. However, what's on the paper is undoubtedly happening. So essentially, the explanation for this is that liberal women have a lot less children than conservative women, because in the sexual revolution, there was a lot of brainwashing going on, telling women that their purpose in life was to be in the workplace with men, working themselves alongside their fathers, their brothers. And it's not a actual proper vision for women. That's not where they belong. And this sort of brainwashing appealed to a lot of women, because especially those who are more rebellious and want to get out from the shadow of their husbands. And so in pursuit of freedom, they found themselves trapped in the corporate lives that men have led in the 50s, and really ever since, I guess you could say, but to a lesser extent in the 50s, but it was still present. And to alleviate that, I would say, in my video, I essentially proposed two policies in particular. That being, first, the maternal income plan, which essentially gets back to the concept which I mentioned earlier of paying childcare workers but not mothers. Essentially, what this would do is, it's sort of inspired by Andrew Yang's UBI proposal. It proposes an income to mothers whose husbands are employed and married mothers whose husbands are employed. I can't remember what was the other one. Hang on. Yeah, I can't remember. I think that was it, actually. So they would essentially get a yearly annual salary that would be a proposed rate of about $1,000 per month. It could also exponentially increase depending on what we could afford. I'm not trying to really skyrocket the deficit. I know that gets more, as the price goes up, the more backlash it gets. So I think $1,000 a month is a good starting point. It could be that, like a flat rate, or it could be about $500 a month and just increase per child. So I don't really know how to calculate the latter figure, but the $1,000 monthly figure would come in at about $116.7 billion every year. It sounds like a lot, but it really isn't when you look at where the federal budget goes. The military budget, for instance, is about $700 billion. And I'm not entirely convinced that every dollar of that $700 billion is wisely spent. And as well as that, I'm inspired by the ideas of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban,
Mm-hmm.
who essentially in Hungary he implemented this policy that would hand out 10 million florent or $30,000 euro loans to newly married couples. These loans would gradually be forgiven, and they would be forgiven entirely after those couples have 3 children. And what that essentially represents is perhaps a down payment on the home where they can raise their children. Perhaps it's a car that they could use. The amount of good that this would have on the amount of good of an impact this would have on the lives of mothers, fathers, and even children is exponential. And this would be about, I think the figure's $85 billion, if I remember correctly. So essentially for these 2 programs, we have a total cost of 200 billion, which is like nothing. So I think it's a bargain. I think it's something that we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, so I 100% agree. What we need to do is make being the stay-at-home mom not just a option. I'm not gonna like force women to be, as all the detractors would say, I'm not gonna force all women to be, pregnant, barefooted in the kitchen. But obviously, it'd be I'm gonna make this a more suitable, a more attractive option for women to take. And I think fundamentally women, like you can't force women to stay at, to the home, but I think you can make societal carrots and sticks where, you, I think you have to subsidize, given options where women could be like, it's actually gonna be really, I don't have to go to work because right now, this obviously is going to go into like a huge discussion on economics. And as you mentioned about Andrew Yang, he said that we need human-centered capitalism, and he mentioned how like the economy doesn't take into account the mother staying at home because
Yeah.
and like this is kind of a lot of libertarian for econ. It's like, well, that woman isn't doing her like being in the backyard and maybe pushing her child on a swing or helping or whatever. This isn't like or helping walking them in the park or something. This isn't helping the economy. This isn't productive. A woman could be more productive being in the corporate workforce. But the thing is, not everything has to maximize economic efficiency.
Yeah, that's kind of an economist's worldview, and people who really aren't economists who think this way are kind of kidding themselves if they think that this is the only thing that matters substantially. And to get back onto a previous point, just briefly, when like radical feminists say that this would essentially like our goals would be to force women back into the home, that's not actually what we want, because that would actually be deleterious to our goal of wanting a strong family. Because if you force a woman back into the home who doesn't want a family, they probably aren't going to be the strongest mother. So yeah, the goal is to incentivize it.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. I agree with the more of a it's going to be and I think naturally women want to be mothers, and it's just that right now it's going to there's a lot of our economic system is well okay, well you're staying at home and not being a slave, okay, well tough luck, and we don't have to. The way I do it, so the first big thing that I put in my family policy, I call it like the Great Family Society. Basically the first thing is basically the same thing as you. It's now obviously I'm not I don't know how to exactly to calculate budget, how much this would, because I don't know where the statistics of how many children are there, how much things are there. The way I say
kind of a rough estimate in my policy video. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect. The $85 billion cost with the loan program thing is like a complete maximum. That's if every like married couple that every year accepts the $30,000 loan and pays it off in its entirety. So that's like a maximum estimate. And the other one is also like it's just kind of ballpark figure. So yeah, I understand that.
And one thing there was this thing I forgot my mind, but the thing with if I had to go back to so for example the way I do it is for stay at home, so this would only apply to married families. If you're single, we kind of need you to get married. And because right now we're kind of actually incentivizing single motherhood. There's a lot of welfare programs where, like, if you get married and all that, you start like losing out. It's actually net. There's a way the government is incentivizing where a woman could be a single mother and that just live off the government. What we need to do is where the woman doesn't live off the government, she's able to live off her family.
Hmm.
And so the way I do it, I have the figures that I put in front of here. So the way I put it is for stay-at-home mothers,
Hmm.
every for their first now we could play with numbers, but like the way I say, I want to make it where the more children you have, the more benefits you get. So and I also want to have a sustainable birth rate. So what happens is that obviously if you're married and you have children, you start getting money instantly for your first child.
Hmm.
For your first child, I say you get $6,000 a year for one child. For two children, that doubles to 12,000.
Hmm.
From three children, it's 20,000. For four children, 28,000, and then for it caps out at, if you're a married mother and you have five children, you get 35,000. Now this depends on, let's say you and this goes up until your child turns 18.
Hmm.
And basically what this does is that gives you money where it's a sustainable cushion where you're like, hey, maybe so for example, let's say the father makes 40,000. Maybe he's just some regular construction worker. He's a he's just a regular Joe, but he's working class. He doesn't make a lot. He's not maybe he's not even the middle class. He makes maybe $40,000, $50,000, right?
Hmm.
Well, and in order for them to sustain themselves, the mother might have to go to work and maybe make also 30,000 or something to make it up. So maybe, and he's like, because so let's say she has three children. Well, in my plan, she would get $20,000 a year, and this would be divided up monthly.
Hmm.
So 20,000. So if she stays at home with the three children, and the father work, they make 40,000, he makes 40,000 or 50,000. Suddenly, that family's income is 60 or 70,000.
Hmm.
And the mother's staying at home. So it's like a cushion. It's not supposed to like, obviously, you can't live off $20,000, but it's supposed to be like a man's able to provide for the family, and that's supposed to be a sustainable cushion to take care of those children. And obviously, as you can see, like exponentially once you get above two and three, once you get to 2, 3 children, obviously is to increase a lot of the birth. So obviously that's the thing that,
Hmm.
and I would also have it where it would be, I've set aside $300 billion for it. I'm like, I don't know how much it would exactly, cost.
Yeah, that's very hard to calculate, I'd say. I don't think I
Yeah.
would be able to do it either. So
So obviously maybe I wish I had the congressional budget office where they like analyze my plans.
yeah, that'd be nice.
But obviously I would do it, as I said, for married families, and I would also withdraw it if like families are like, are drug, they get, maybe they're into drugs or they're a crime or they're abusive or something.
Hmm.
This would only go for like, so obviously that's like the main bread and butter.
That's a good proposal. I like it. Yeah.
And what would be some of um um I could like list off all the things like all my other policies on family. Do you want to, I don't want to just make it about me because this show's about you. Do you want to mention about kind of talk more about your thoughts on kind of, do you want me to just keep talking about like, we could just like spar on like ways we can incentivize marriages, just like practical aspects, because we've been talking a lot about philosophical things, kind of like why family and marriages and children are important.
Hmm.
uh we can now spar on like kind of more practical things, or not
Okay.
spar, like kind of
Yeah,
talk.
yeah. I don't
You
think
want to talk
spar is
about
the
that?
right word. I think we're pretty much in agreement, but
Yeah.
we're just an exchange of ideas. But essentially, I think that as well as just purely economically incentivizing it, we have to promote it culturally. And I
Hmm.
think the way that we can best do that is having it in schools.
Hmm.
I think that family values should be taught in high schools. There should be courses. I think the four that I proposed in my video are natalism, family dynamics, marriage, and childcare. And each of those four would have a different kind of family values. Obviously, not all schools will be big enough to have all four of them. So we kind of have to rank which ones we view as the most important. And as well as that, I think that taking another page out of Viktor Orban, who is kind of a trailblazer for natalist policies in the broader Western world, um, we also women who have four or more children, we could make them exempt from income taxes for the rest of their lives,
Mm-hmm.
which I think would work very well. And we could this might be bad optics here, but in the Soviet Union during World War II, the Family Code of 1944 established a title called Mother Heroine, which would be awarded to women who had 10 or more children. Now, adopting policies from the Soviet Union might not be the best optics, but I think that it's kind of a good idea. I think that it would be fundamentally good to have society recognize that as a good thing and promote it as such, and give titles to women who are prepared to go on that natalist adventure for the betterment of our nation.
You actually took one of my policies I was about to explain.
Oh. It's just kind of the same thing then.
Basically, I actually agree with you with all that. You actually mentioned it about culturally. Now, obviously, you can't. There's a lot of, it's very hard. You can't just say culture, make it, uphold motherhood or families. You can't It's not like you can't.
Yeah, it's not like a bumper sticker thing.
Yeah. So it's the way because I think remembered I was going to talk about. So if you look at the birth rate now, obviously the birth rate in America is like 1.7 or something. But if you look at for example, the way I describe it is that, for example, the Mormons, which, they live in modern society, they're not like, they have regular appliances, technological, their birth rate's like 3.2 or something. And, Christian conservative women have like 2.3 or 2.4 as their thing. And now, this is obviously where, maybe technology does have an impact, but the aim is to have a birth rate at like it's 5 or 6. And so, obviously, technology is going to impact how much children you have. But, if every family had 3 children, that'd solve our birth rate. And plus, we wouldn't even need immigration. So in terms of so that's what I was mentioning. What would you say about that? So I don't know exactly how we, except I could say, people should be more religious. I think, as you mentioned, we should, obviously it's going to be kind of hard incentivizing religious, things. But I think, as you mentioned, it should be not only, it should be through our schools. It should be through carrots and sticks, in the sense that, businesses that are more family friendly, they get more more benefits. As he's mentioned, that the government should, it's like a role, how when a state starts pushing having carrots and sticks, that just starts influencing the wider cultural society. And when you have these large the way I put it, if I had to put if I had to skip to that point, one thing I put is that there should be a public holiday that celebrates marriage, and that there should be a public, if the government has a public broadcasting, I think we do, CBS or PBS, I think.
PBS. Yeah.
And that should put out the downsides of divorce, the downsides of abortion, and then uphold here's the good things about this, here's the good things about marriage and family. And then
I think that's a really good idea. Just to kind of interject here, I think that that sort of recognition would go a long ways. Yeah,
because it's gonna be it's kind of like how the way in my ideal society, how, and this is it's not, there's not a public holiday for gay marriage, but there's a whole month dedicated to, and this is not even government enforced. And then all the companies are like, oh look, we're all our things are rainbows. I think instead of that, it would be cool if all the companies started being pro-family, a sort of patriotic corporatism in a way.
That's a brilliant idea. I love that sort of thinking. It's fight the left and take back their cultural dominance, take it back rather than just abandoning it, which is the sort of typical conservative approach. So I'm quite a big fan of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you mentioned before, I would also have a biannual award ceremony that holds up ideal families. So what would happen is, and I would also establish a Bureau of Family, a Department of Family Affairs in the national government, which would actually be a government subset that tracks marriage rates, divorce rates, childbirth rates, and would look at what's exactly affecting families. And this whole department would just be their entire jobs would just focus on, ensuring the promotion and the sustainment of families. And they would go out and they would look at, which are the most perfect American family. Now, not every family is going to be perfect, but like we could uphold like an idealized, hey, this like which ones are like, they have these large families, they have these, they raise them well. They are like these, all the children are like, maybe one of them's in Boy Scouts, one of them's in like, maybe the girl is like in, she's in, maybe she does soft, maybe she's involved in the community. They're growing, they're not in crime, they're not drug, they're actually this perfect family. And we could award them with like, especially with big families too. We could just like, hey, here's a recognition that the government is like, here are awards, and we could take like 10 families or something, like, twice a year, and like give them awards, and like this family does this, and just give a recognition, and it'd be like a huge parade and everything like that. That's one thing so that's kind of like as a cultural carrots and sticks as well. And also I agree with everything you mentioned about having these classes in school and everything like that.
So I have a question here. It's fine if you don't have an answer to the second part of this question, but when you talk about the Department of Family Affairs, is that going to be like a cabinet level position in the president's cabinet? And if so, is there anyone you would have in mind for that position?
Yeah. So the first one is that's easy to mention. It would be like a whole new, how like for example
stuff.
Like, for example, how we did, how the president, when Bush created the Homeland Security, this was because of 9/11 and the new war on terrorism. I think, we need, because that's a recognition that there was like a problem, but now we have to recognize there's a problem with broken families, and we need to create like a Department of Family Affairs, as we did with the Department of Homeland Security, sort of like that. Now, in terms of a leader, that's a very good question. There's a lot of people who are thinkers, and like the idea of like we need families, but there's not a specific person that I think is like, because we need someone who you probably asked the questions for like, because you want an answer too, so sorry if I'm like putting it back to you, but do you have any like people in mind that you think would be interesting in that?
I've sat down numerous times, and I've been, as like just a fun little thing, like if I was president, who would I appoint to my cabinet? And I've sat there and I filled like 5 spots, and the rest I've just completely blanked on. So I'm not really the person to ask. I was just wondering if you had anyone in mind.
Yeah, I mean, just like I'm ideally, I would say, in my opinion, it would be like some sort of like act, like maybe I'm doing this, like maybe like an actual like married, or like a woman who's actually a mother, and she actually kind of. Well, maybe someone who actually has some experience. Maybe like, I don't know. I'm kind of just shooting spitballs. I don't have like a set like, thing. But another thing I would.
That's kind of a aspect of one of my video. I have made like this passing remark on perhaps mandatory marriage counseling, and then this I posted it in some Discord server, and then this like random libertarian just joined my Discord and just started like reading me the riot act about why this is like tyrannical or whatever, and I just like, okay, dude. And
well, I mean, anything that has any sort of like good thing is tyrannical. But so basically, what I think this actually is a good talk about like cultural carrots and sticks, as we mentioned. Obviously, there's laws that we could pass to make it easier, but like it's kind of like how the left took over. Like you can't argue for you can't talk about differences, and like you can't talk about how for example, there's a certain people who are more disproportionately in crime, because then that's you're talking about a disproportionate inequality. And that's, you can't talk about that because that's racist. So you can't be racist. But, maybe we have the same carrots and sticks that, oh, you're a single mother. Oh, you're just some like whore. Well, that's actually a bad thing. We're not gonna make it illegal. We're not gonna like throw you in jail for if you're a whore. But like,
cultural stigmatization is that's a good way to go, because obviously the state can't do everything. There's things that I would actually be uncomfortable with the state doing, not to get libertarian mode, but you can't just go complete authoritarian, because that's actually dangerous. But there are a lot of steps that I would want the state to take, but there's some that would just be kind of completely ridiculous, like the idea of say outlawing premarital sex.
Yeah.
There's unless you have cops going around looking in people's bedroom windows, I don't know how. I don't know how you could enforce that. So
Yeah,
limits.
I think fundamentally it's just like you need to have a resurgence in like the right the right cultural and religious boards and traditions and values that kind of where people they don't for example there's a reason like whether again this is against all libertarian but there's a reason why we're not just going to inject ourselves with heroin because we maybe it's not just experience because I mean I don't know about you but I have never seen heroin or done heroin before but like I just know
I hope from keep it that way too.
yeah, I hope so too. But and I hope in terms of all that, we just do it. We don't do it because because it's just culturally stigmatizing. It's like yeah, we're just not going to do it. Just as like we're just not going to have premarital sex. It's just you could actually. I had the discussion with a lot of libertarian like when I had libertarians on in my ideal world we wouldn't need the government to like step in and actually start enforce. Now obviously I don't believe everything can be done without. I think I'm fundamentally at heart, even if our civil society was perfect, the way I see it is that the more order we have inside of us, the less order you need to be imposed from outside. But I think fundamentally that you would still need the government because there's still large scale collective action problems that could only be solved from the government. But I think you wouldn't need the government to be like we had good marriage rates without this family plan. It's just a matter now the government has to step in to help them out. But if we could just it's going to be I think the most important because the most practical thing a politician can do is the things we're describing and what we're talking about in terms of the policies to help promote marriage and families. But it's very hard for a politician to just change the culture entirely, and so it's going to be hard to. But fundamentally, the biggest thing if we're going to start having a society that prioritizes marriage, we could start with things we can do, and then hopefully we could change what we through about how to promote families and things like that through a cultural sense. In terms of moving from that, a few other things. Now, in my opinion, now I don't know about you or a lot. For me, I support universal health care. Now, obviously, I don't support like not everything that I'm not a like ban private insurance and everything, but I do believe that United States citizens should have a basic healthcare package.
In regards to that, I would say yes. I tend to agree that healthcare should be socialized to some degree, but I think that the universal healthcare plan provided by like Bernie Sanders is completely unrealistic due to just the cost.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, is there a way that to kind of like we can come back to kind of on topic after this, but I've never really heard the answer as to how one would actually pay for that. So
okay, so you're right. We kind of do. This would get about healthcare, but I could explain my opinion on why we about healthcare if you want.
Yeah, just quickly, then we can get back. I don't mean to distract. I'm just.
No problem. So before we do that, I'll just mention the policy and then mention about why I think healthcare should be covered by the government. So my idea is that free is basically under this universal healthcare program, all U.S. American mothers would get what would be covered would be free pregnancy, free childbirth, and free neonatal care. So there's gonna be no costs. Like I think it's like an abomination that when a woman has to like give birth or has to go through the pregnancy process, maybe she has to get tons of she has to like pay thousands of dollars to bring a child to this world. It should be there shouldn't be a cost to bringing a child into this world, in my opinion. I think if we're gonna make it easy to women to get to give birth, I think having high quality neonatal care and pregnancy and child care birth being covered under the system would drastically help in terms of like helping. And I also think that once a child is born, I like the Finnish idea of a baby box. So like the government gives like here's like some little baby clothes and books and like things you want to help a baby and all that.
Yeah, kind of like it's sort of like a public version of a baby shower, except on a much more localized basis.
Yeah, and I don't think it would cost so much too, because the box would probably the box itself would probably only be like
Yeah,
like 50
the
bucks would
cost
be.
for that isn't really the concern.
Yeah,
Just
it's
more of a universal healthcare plan in general. And
yeah.
before we continue, I'd like to note that Antifa Socialism TV wants to debate you.
uh, he commented on my immigration
Yes,
video.
I saw
Uh,
that.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't. I mean, I have a lot. Maybe I don't know. I guess, but I'll see. Um, in terms of um, I'll quickly, very quickly, uh, talk about why I think healthcare should be universal. So in America, we spend 18% of our GDP on healthcare. It's not a matter of like if it's going to be more expensive. We're actually being hugely inexpensive, hugely expensive, hugely inefficient in terms of our way we're spending our healthcare. So 18%, and it's rising rapidly, is based on healthcare. In other countries, in comparable Western countries, it's between 9 and 11% of GDP spent on healthcare. One thing that if you look at study, if all if and what so here's the few things that would do so the system I'm talking about is all American U.S. citizens would be given a basic healthcare package. They'd be given a Medicare card the same way they would have like a Social Security card, and you could go to any doctor you want, any hospital you want, and any sort of and these are the things that are covered. Now, the things that aren't covered by that, you could get private insurance if you want. You could, if things like cosmetics, you could get that covered if you want by private insurance. Now, why would this be good for America? So there's a few things. First, it would simplify the cost, because what happens is because of we're a multi-payer system, meaning there's like multiple different ways people pay, and it's what this would do is studies have shown it would actually save money by our overall healthcare spending by between 100 and 500 billion dollars a year, because it would simplify. And when you have the government being able to control these costs, they're able to simplify and actually negotiate down the price. Just for example, did you know that like the federal government's prohibited from like negotiating down prescription drugs? And if they just had that power to negotiate with prescription drug companies, they'll be able to actually save like almost like $100 billion just on itself. Mm-hmm. Because the thing is, and there's a reason, like, I don't know why like insulin in America should cost 100, I like a couple, like 10 times, 20 times more than it should be in Canada.
I don't either. I think
obviously,
I think that healthcare for that reason is really the most complicated issue that we have to deal with. And so I'm just trying to get kind of a more fleshed out understanding of it.
Oh yeah,
that's why I just brought it up. So we can move on anytime you want.
Let me quickly just kind of lay out my. So not only would it actually save money, and you could pay for it through a payroll, the same way we pay for Social Security, through a payroll tax. The thing is that almost like 97% of all Americans would actually save money. Like this would actually save Americans money in terms of healthcare, and it would actually expand choice in the sense of so right now what happens is that in this complicated insurance web, he's like, these are the only doctors that are under our plan. These are the only hospitals that are under our plan. And if you go, the term like out of network. So basically, if you go to an out of network hospital that doesn't cover that specific insurance, you get slapped with a huge, thousands of dollars in payments.
Oh, yeah. I know.
And I don't think that should, what this would do is give you more choice in like what type of hospital and doctor you could go to, because then the public system wouldn't discriminate. I think also, this would actually simplify the federal bureaucracy, because my idea is that we would take Medicare, we would take Medicaid, Obamacare, the subsidies for that, CHIP, and just consolidate all of it into a singular program. And this would actually simplify the tax code, because a lot of the tax code is, in America, we have employment-based healthcare. And what happens with that is that, and this is being abundantly clear with this coronavirus, a lot, because healthcare is tied to your job. But like, what if you want to quit your job? Well, you can't, because now that's the only way you get health insurance. What happens is that if you could go to any job you want and choose and still have healthcare covered. And so this would expand choice. It would simplify the federal bureaucracy. It would save costs overall. And I think fundamentally, as a government, it would prevent the fundamentally, obviously this is a cliche from kind of like a social democratic point of view, but like, I think that, you shouldn't, if you get like hit by a car, you shouldn't just be in thousands of dollars in debt. Or if you get cancer, like for example, this coronavirus thing, a lot of people now say that test and treatment and everything for coronavirus should be free. But the same thing should apply for cancer. And, like if you get a stroke or a heart attack, I don't think that, I think there's an obvious discussion on like, what should be covered and at how much. Maybe it's 80-20% split. And, so we could have a good discussion, but I think, in my opinion, it's the government's job to ensure that, because when you have a universal healthcare system, at least from what I've seen, you would cut costs, it would expand choice, it would simplify the federal bureaucracy, and it would fundamentally provide every American with so it would get rid of the uninsured insurance rate. So there's like millions of Americans who don't even have insurance. It would also allow people to it would also be able to like choose the job. Like it's not going to be tied to employment. So it actually would help businesses too. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of going on a rant. So I just wanted to explain kind of my view. Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. I think it's very informative. Maybe we can have a discussion on that a little later, maybe privately.
Yeah.
But perhaps we should get back to the to the topic.
Yeah.
not that was bad, but
yeah. So in terms of if I had to list off a few of my other policies, so obviously under that would be, paid for your like, and I think what you mentioned before, I said there would be free marriage counseling and childbirth classes for all, not just for like expected parents, but also I think it should be in the school system, as we mentioned before.
Yeah.
I think you actually got into a little bit more detail on like that than I did, but I agree with you 100% on that. I think this is just another carrots and sticks thing, as you said.
Yeah.
Another thing I think we'll also have to, this is like more family based, but I think we need to like start. So one thing I mentioned is I may ban no fault divorce. I would also restrict divorce to just like, and I would actually have but one thing you mentioned is that actually having punishments for infidelity. I think adultery should be a crime because, it's like
it is in many states. So I don't know why you can't do it federally.
Yeah. And I think just, marriage should be, if you get, it's a, I mean, I know this is like a libertarian social contract BS thing, but, I mean, if you want to think of it legally, it is a contract. It's like the wedding vows mean something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And if you can get out of it at any time and you can have sex out of wedlock too, what does marriage even mean?
Yeah, because nowadays, because this actually brings us to, I mean, I don't know your views on like gay marriage, but like the reason why we have that is because marriage has been reduced to like, well, it's just something it's someone I just really, really, really love right now.
Yeah,
like that's all it is, and that's the definition of marriage. And then like, what's the purpose? Yeah, and if that's all, if that's how we view it, then why should we restrict it from homosexual? So it's like, if we actually bring back what marriage is and define it as like, cause, marriage isn't just like, oh, I really, really love that person, which it is, but it's the purpose of marriage. And the reason why we support it is because the man and the woman, as we mentioned before, have masculine and feminine traits that,
perfectly
contrast, and that both the, sons and daughters need. And, the purpose is to create children. So, that's the whole purpose of it. So that's the one thing. So in your opinion, what would you do to help incentivize marriage and everything like that?
Oh, well,
like, well, not this, like, maybe that's a bit broad, but like just, how would you make it where marriage is seen as like an institution where, once you're in it for life, basically, unless your spouse dies or something.
Getting rid of no fault divorce laws, I think would do a lot. I know that, obviously I've talked about the Bolshevik origins of it. It's pretty indicative that fact is pretty indicative of what the intentions behind it are, and how our elected officials, including Ronald Reagan, who I believe was the first governor in the United States to sign no-fault divorce laws in California, duping them into believing that it's some sort of personal liberty issue when it's really like just an effort to destroy the family. So that would do a lot of good, first of all. And a lot of education in the schools would do it as well. If you teach marriage as a fundamental block of how society, if you teach the impact of marriage on society, I think that would be very beneficial as a whole. So you couple those things, you could. I I've heard proposals like a bachelor tax, which I don't think is first of all, I don't think it's particularly just because it'd be again, it goes back to the concept of incentivizing versus forcing,
Mhm.
and it also yeah, I'm not really opposed to I'm not really for things like that which would force it on people, but I think once you're in the contract, you have to respect it, and so no fault divorce laws have to go.
Mhm. No,
I'm
no, I agree.
Most of my policies are around promoting childbirth, and I think that actually my $1,000 monthly proposal with the stipulation that the mother has to be married would incentivize marriage as a whole as well.
Mhm. Yeah, that's actually why I made it just for married people as well.
Hmm.
A few things also that I would put. We mentioned it earlier, but I would also. This is kind of a flip on the student debt thing. But I think if a woman who has like debt or something, like student debt or something, and she gets married, and she has like 3 children, I think that that debt should be forgiven. So like if you're like I think that's just like an extra incentive. And also, as you mentioned,
Do
also
you mean
for like
just like student debt or like credit card debt as well?
um for when I first did it, I thought it was just student debt, but I'm kind of open to like in your opinion, what would you do?
Well, I think in regards to student debt, I think college should. I think that college should be free anyway, or public college at least,
Hmm.
for 4 years of it, because that's a way that we can win the war against the left and take back college campuses. That and other certain things, which I think I'll probably discuss in a later video.
Hmm.
But I'm not sure that canceling credit card debt is necessarily the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But I am very opposed to things like usury, and I think that the government should take actions to limit interest rates and things like that. So
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm not really too familiar with that idea. I'd probably have to think about it some more.
Okay.
But I'm
Um,
initially hesitant to kind of go
yeah.
down that road.
For me, it was just focused on student debt
Hmm.
for at the moment. But obviously, I agree. I think that at least a lot of college should be more affordable for a lot of students, especially American citizens.
Yeah.
I think another thing I think we should mention. I think this is a big thing. Is we should have a mass like housing construction program, building like millions of housing, and like the government should have like very like affordable like loans that like very like that are more favorable than like to singles or everything that. So if you're a family, if you're a mother and a father, and especially if you have children, that if you want to buy a house, getting a loan, a mortgage for that house should be like, like it should be like a federal backed mortgage where like, it's not, they're not going to pay for your whole house, but like it's a very favorable in terms of like interest and in terms of how much it'd be more affordable than just, and I think one way we could do that is probably like be more less restrictive on zoning, so more construction can be built. So like I think because housing is obviously that's probably one of the quintessential things of having is having like a home you could call your own.
Hmm.
I think the government constructing a lot of it and giving it to married people is good.
In regards to that, I know that it would have to be done, but I would kind of be hesitant with the way that I implement it because
Hmm.
as long as we're not like tearing down forests and stuff to build
Yeah, yeah,
houses,
obviously.
I think that it would work out. But if it starts drastically impacting the environment, which I'm sort of on the I'm a I'm sort of a green right proponent.
Oh my gosh, we could. I'm gonna discuss all. If I had, so there's two things. One thing is the biggest issue I talk about is like immigration and national sovereignty. The
Hmm.
second biggest thing in my entire thing is environment.
Hmm.
It's actually one of my I made like I've made like 2 or 3 videos explicitly talking how environmentalism is a right wing idea and
Hmm.
not a left wing idea.
Yeah, I mean it's called conservationism,
Yeah, it,
conservatism. It's pretty similar. Just that,
yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a surface level analysis that doesn't really have much behind it, but it is a right wing idea. Absolutely,
Mhm.
it's not just a left wing thing. So I'm glad to see the more right wing people starting to embrace that.
I'll send you some of my environmentalist like
The
um
videos, yeah, I
the
love to watch
videos,
them. Hmm.
and they're pretty short too, so it should take too much time.
Right.
But yeah, I agree with you. You mentioned this earlier about like, and this is obviously going to be this is obviously well, bad optics too. But you know how there's like a pioneer group in the Soviet Union? It's kind
Uh-huh.
of like the Boy Scouts equivalent.
Hmm.
Now, for me, I would establish like a national youth organization for the United States where children could go, and this is like way the culture could. You know how Boy Scouts used to be a quintessential part of American now, but now it's been like cucked and destroyed beyond all recognition.
Yeah, funny
Um,
how that works, huh?
it's a complete damn tragedy about it. But I think what we need to do is have a government youth program where it's like Boy Scouts and it's like Girl Scouts and it's like promoting the right values, the right skills, and a way children could and could actually become better. A place for them to go to where they could improve upon. And remember, the point of it is to make good children. And so, this is where we could instill patriotism and like hard work and,
Hmm.
all the values we want on children. Obviously, a lot of people, a lot of people are trying to say this is like government brainwashing, but
I mean, that's a good point. Like that's the argument they make. But right-wing brainwashing, if you can call it that, is superior to left-wing brainwashing,
oh
which
yeah,
is what you'll have if you don't take action. So
it,
yeah.
exactly. And Black Pilled, I don't know if you watch his videos, but he like looks at movies and like the propaganda behind them. He said that everyone uses propaganda, even in liberal democracies.
Is
And
that Devin Stack?
yeah, Devin Stack.
All right.
He's talked a lot about it, but uh when you talk about so everyone uses propaganda is kind of and brainwashings and these are kind of slanted terms, but like when it comes the fundamental point is government encouragement of something. If the government is encouraging or is apathetic to when they're the government's always going to be promoting some sort of cultural like behavior or moral behavior.
Oh,
and i
absolutely.
think and i think if you're gonna this is just a fact of life. And I think there's you can't just put your hands up. It's like, well, the government should just be apathetic when the families are breaking apart. And obviously
Yeah.
they wouldn't. I think it's
Yeah.
actually good.
I'm sorry to cut in here, but in even like a lack of action is taking action because
Mhm.
first of all, it allows the left, and if people just obey the state and what the state does and see that the state doesn't care, why would they care as well? So
Mhm.
you're going to convert people to a state of not caring as well. So yeah, you can keep going.
Oh
Sorry.
yeah, no, you basically you added. I mean, you're completely right. It's so when the government is like instilling good values, you actually create better children. I mean, if you want, it's like, well, if the schools are like, just if the culture is like, be a slut, do what you want. I mean, then girls are like, well, I mean, and they see, and they, if you look at their cultural icons and all they're doing is twerking and like,
Hmm.
being a bunch of sluts, and they see that, oh, look at all these women, they're like being like these whores and they're getting money. Oh, maybe this is how I should act. And I don't have a mom or a dad or whatever, so maybe this is how I'm supposed to act.
Yeah,
So
people talk about individual liberty, but it's not a closed system. The actions of other people affect others. Peer pressure, this is what peer pressure is. And
mhm.
the sort of libertarian idea that people can act however they want and have no broader societal consequences is just wrong. It betrays a lack of understanding of reality.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Sorry, my dog wanted to
Oh, no
was
worries.
barking there. Okay, so yeah, and no, I 100% agree. Um, for I missed the last you were talking and then my dog started barking. Do you think you
Okay.
could go over that one more time?
Yeah, sure. What was the last thing you heard?
Um, you started talking about what was it? How about the carrots and sticks about if the government is you're not it's not a closed system.
All right.
And
Okay.
yeah.
So, essentially, the libertarian idea that people can act on their own whims and desires and on a sort of libertine basis and have no broader societal consequences that result from that is just wrong. It demonstrates a fundamental lack of understanding of reality because especially now, even when we live in like the digital era where everything's online and whatnot,
Mhm.
one girl being slutty and making an OnlyFans account and getting a massive following will will tell other girls, first of all, that it's okay to do, and second of all, that they should do it. So it doesn't really work like that. It's not a closed system.
You're putting it like, 100%, like you're putting it exactly perfectly. It's not a, we mentioned this like in the very beginning of the stream, but as we said, you're not an atomized one man island.
Yeah,
the actions
absolutely.
of others affect you, and state action and state power, if you wielded in the right way. Now, obviously, it can be abused. Power can be abused, but it's not like an impossibility where the state can promote good behavior and like push the culture in a certain direction. And when you push the culture where you uphold there is right and wrong. There is objective right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And there is an objective way you make good societies, and there's an objective way you have denigrate societies. And state using state power to uphold the good is a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I agree. And again, the libertarian notion would be that the state has no right to tell you what is good, which just, I mean, again, that's not true.
Yeah.
It sounds like I have a lot of animosity towards libertarians, but it's more so just their ideology.
Exactly.
I mean, I myself am a libertarian, or I was a libertarian. I'm not now, but so I understand where they're coming from. It's just that when the ideas, when you examine them critically, fall apart. So that's kind of why I'm emphasizing this so much.
Oh, it's always, that's, it's less like, we talk about libertarian, a lot of, we've kind of been kicking libertarianism on the ground, but, it's not like, I think, they're not like they want evil. They just, their ideology is led to, they're misguided. The ideology is, I mean, it was also, left wing people use kind of libertine about liberation and, you're being oppressed. They kind of take that to, the kind of the same bedfellows in a way. So that's kind of a lot of the things I've kind of been thinking about that encourages both, marriage and child rearing. So I guess we could start wrapping it up.
Okay.
So I'll let you, I guess, end it. I'll kind of explain why, fundamentally why having community and why having families and encouraging childbirth and why having things outside of this individual frame of the nation and the community and such, why is that all important at the end of the day?
Okay, so I'm not sure if this was in Black Panther, and I haven't seen Marvel movies, but I've heard the African proverb: "The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." And I think it might be kind of getting more cliche to bring that up. I'm not entirely sure, but it really is indicative of the fact that people need community in order to flourish. So when you take that community away, and for many people, community is national identity and the family. Those are two major sources. So they have to find community in other places. Like for some, it's in gangs, which is obviously terrible. We don't want our children joining gangs. But it's natural that they would if no one else accepts them. So this focus on individualism is irresponsible. It does a disservice to the individual who is taught that their own personal indulgence is the most important thing in the world. When in fact, when the community flourishes, the individuals inside it will flourish as well. And that community can even be your neighborhood. So if your neighborhood is strong, chances are your house will be strong, your family will be strong. So this should kind of speak to the sort of importance of family in traditional society and what we should strive to do, what we should strive to form society around. So along those lines, I think that kind of touches on that kind of neatly summarizes what we've discussed today. So I think I had a fantastic time discussing this. I love exchanging ideas, particularly with people who are willing to hear them. Like there's a lot of people who will object to our ideas, but I hope that if they hear this, I hope that it would make them reconsider what they personally believe.
Hmm.
So that'll do it, I guess, for me. Yeah,
One thing that you actually, when you were saying that, one thing that I remember is, it's like, you know, like the saying, like, well, who cares if the people in your neighborhood do heroin or something? Like
yeah,
when they, you know, like, well, as long as it doesn't affect you. Well, people who say that have never been in a neighborhood of people who've done heroin. Like the
yeah. They never
reaction.
lived in a neighborhood where one house was like where drug dealers live, and there was a bunch of shady people coming around. And second of all, as well as that, even if it didn't affect them, even if they were right, how have we become so sick as a society to where it's the normal to just not care about anyone except your own bottom line?
I know. I mean I mean fundamentally, as I mean, we're talking again about it, but it's this is the difference between a strong society and a degenerating society. And
Yep.
when you obviously, you know, I mean, you know, just if I had to throw a little bit of a bone to the libertarian people watching, it's, you know, you could have a good, you know, a society, you know, especially in the early Americas where there wasn't actually such a big government, there was a sense of like, because of the morals and the cultural, and there was a lot of, you know, a lot of them weren't these like, you know, people who just cared about themselves. They cared about their local communities and their clubs and their, you know, unions and their like families and their everything like that. And there was a sense of um, uh, you know, even without government, you know, they understood that they needed to take care of others. We just don't have that sort of support system anymore. And you know, if we just excessively focus on, well, just the individuals will do it. Well, the thing is that you need the right type of individual, the right type of laws, and the right type of social view, you know, social morals to actually have it where, you know, if you actually have that, then you wouldn't need as much government corrosion to actually try to bring about an orderly society.
Yeah,
You could,
absolutely.
so yeah, well, I had a really great time chatting with
Same.
you.
Yeah.
It's a, you know, it's you know, everyone who's watching, I check him out. He's going to be uploading a lot more in the future. He has great videos. You should check the ones that are out. Subscribe to him.
I would say the same. I would say subscribe to him, but I don't have much of an audience to make my so
Well, maybe once you become really famous, you could, you know, shout me out as well.
yeah,
You
I'll
know,
throw you a
maybe.
bone.
But yeah, hey, it's a really great pleasure having you. It's you know, hey, I know we just kind of talked, but you know, just for a little bit. But hey, I consider you a friend, and if you ever need anything in terms of, you know, personally or professionally, I'm here for you.
All right. Well, I appreciate that greatly. Obviously, you can't climb to the top all by yourself, so I'm glad to have people like you here helping me. So
Yeah, no problem.
thank
I
you for
do.
that.
All right. Well, aim high, wander on from America with Russian love.